Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to start with a flag salute, which I'll do. Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sangha,
Here.
Commissioner Milas,
Here.
Commissioner Roostaller,
Here.
Commissioner Midgley, Commissioner Grunsky.
Here. Okay, moving on. Actions on requests for continuances or withdrawals.
No, Chair, there are not. Are we going to announce changing the order of the items?
Yes, so we're going to hear item 2 first and item 1, so we're going to switch the order there.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, at this time, the public is welcome to address the Planning Commission on items of interest to the public that are not listed on the agenda. Would anyone like to speak to any items not listed on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Online.
For those on Microsoft Teams, if you'd like to speak on items not on the agenda, you may speak now.
Okay, moving on. Again, we're going to go to action item 2 on your agenda and hear that first. General Plan Map Amendment number PA 2100168. I believe we have a staff report.
Yes, thank you. We have Elisa Goulart. She's our associate planner, and she has a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Grunsky, and good evening, Commissioners. This project is comprised of 3 applications for a parcel that is currently designated and zoned low-density residential. The first is an application to remap the general plan designation to community commercial. The second is an application to rezone the parcel to community commercial. And the third application is an administrative use permit to develop a 12,200 square foot commercial building with multiple approved use types. The proposed project is located on the southeast corner of East Main Street and South Miwok Village Drive in Stockton. The project site has a general plan designation and zoning currently of low density residential. Project parcel is 1.9 acres in size. To the north and south of the parcel is residential development. To the west is a mix of commercial and residential uses. To the east is agricultural with scattered residences. In 2006, the subject property was part of a 27-acre rezoning application to change the zoning from urban agriculture to low-density residential in preparation for a major subdivision that would create 108 residential lots. In 2019, when the major subdivision map was recorded, the 1.9-acre subject parcel was not included in the subdivision, but was reserved for a later use. In order to approve a general plan map amendment and zoning map reclassification, several findings must be made in the affirmative. These findings include that the proposal is consistent with the general plan and other documents, that the proposal has been reviewed in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, that it will benefit the public, that the property is suitable for proposed uses, and that the change will not be detrimental to adjacent uses. These findings are contained in the staff report, and staff is recommending that the findings be adopted by the Planning Commission. The underlying project is a 12,200 square foot multi-use commercial building that includes leasable space and an atrium and a parking area that will include 6 electric vehicle charging stations. The following use types are recommended for approval for the leased spaces. It's offices, limited service restaurants, a farmer's market, and a public safety facility for a sheriff's star satellite office. The Community Development Department received a letter from a neighborhood resident who opposes the rezoning to commercial for fear it will result in criminal activity and higher housing costs. However, it's possible to make the findings for the proposed amendment, and the Community Development Department recommends approval of the applications. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant depicting the 1,220 square foot building and 63 parking spaces that include the 6 electric vehicle recharging stations. There's parking here and parking all down here. Here's the driveway here off of Miwok Village Drive. This picture is taken from East Main Street, looking southeast towards the corner where the subject property is located. See the there. You can see the driveway here off of Miwok Village Drive. This photo is taken from East Main Street looking west. The project parcel is on the left, kind of behind the tree. The East Main Street and South Miwok Village Lane intersection is in the background. It is recommended that the Planning Commission forward these applications and related documents to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendations contained in the staff report. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Questions for staff, anyone? Okay. Yeah, please.
The site.
Okay, the residents are on the bottom then, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Okay, no other questions. We will hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Mike Hakem. I'm here tonight with Dr. Ernie Vasti, my client, and we're here to present the application as set forth in the staff report. By way of brief background, I've known the applicant for almost my whole life, starting with St. Gertrude's Elementary School on Main Street here in Stockton, and Dr. Vasti was my treating physician for my family for many, many years. Kind of an interesting quick story. Ernie grew up in this particular neighborhood that we're going to be discussing this evening, and he told me some years ago that he wanted to revitalize the neighborhood and move back there himself. A few years ago, Ernie helped create the 108-lot makeup subdivision that's currently being built, and Ernie thought it was a great idea to strengthen the neighborhood by having a commercial site in the particular neighborhood at that corner. In fact, Ernie is also building a home for he and his wife there at that subdivision. The concept right now is open to different approaches, but what Ernie thinks makes sense is an electrical vehicle charging station and other commercial uses such as an office, cafe, restaurant, and maybe even a weekly farmer's market. He's been in discussions with the Sheriff's Department to have a Sheriff's Department kiosk in the building. As you know from the staff report, there's already a public school adjacent to the neighborhood, and there's already a dedicated park site for the subdivision. As staff indicated, the agenda is a recommendation for a change in the general plan to community commercial, and also a zoning change to community commercial, and then the ancillary administrative use permit for the commercial building. It's important to point out that the Board of Supervisors approved this 108-unit subdivision back in 2006. So the recommendation for you this evening is to present this as a positive recommendation, approve the findings adopted by staff, and present this matter to the board. So I'll conclude that, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, with those brief comments. My client's here. If you have anything of any concerns or questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from any other proponents of this project. in person or online? Any opposition? Person or online? Okay, no need for a rebuttal. Back to the commission.
I make a motion we approve general plan map amendment PA 2100168 with the recommendations submitted by staff.
Second?
We have a motion and we have a second. Roll call?
Commissioner Roostaller,
Yes.
Commissioner Sangha,
Yes.
Midgley, Commissioner Milas,
Yes.
Commissioner Grunsky.
Yes. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the first, which is now the second action item, use permit number PA 2000012.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make an announcement. So I will be handing over this meeting to Deputy Director Kern King for this item. My husband represents the applicant, and therefore I'm recusing myself from working on the I did recuse myself from working on the application once he was engaged in 2022. In order to avoid even the perception of conflict, I'm going to step out of the chambers for this item. Okay. But I will be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, I believe we have a staff report.
Again, thank you again. This project is a use permit to establish a small winery in 2 phases over 5 years to include winery events with amplified sound. The project site is located on the east side of North Davis Road, 1 mile south of West Peltier Road, at the end of a 2,600-foot-long access easement. The applicant is requesting to modify the improved driveway width along the access easement from the minimum requirement of 25 feet to 20 feet. The project parcels have the general plan land use designations of resource conservation and general agriculture, and are zoned general agriculture with a 40-acre minimum. The red outlined parcels depict the project location, which is comprised of 2 legal lots. Because project improvements will bisect property lines, the applicant will be required to submit an application for a merger or a lot line adjustment so that all winery improvements are located on a single legal lot. Sometimes I have to try all of these buttons before I get the right one. I'm sorry. But this is where the access easement starts at Davis Road, runs all the way out here to the property. And as you can see, there are 2 properties, 1 and then 2 here, over which the easement crosses, as well as the irrigation district property. This is an enlargement of the site plan depicting the proposed winery. The production building is depicted on the south side of the pond, that's down here, with the covered crush pad also down there. The multi-purpose building is up here on the north side of the pond, and the event center will be adjacent to that. And the tasting room is located over here on this side of the pond. The project is proposed in 2 phases. Phase 1 includes the construction of a 10,530 square foot production building and a 2,300 square foot covered crush pad. Phase 2 includes the construction of an approximately 10,000 square foot multi-purpose building, a 1,500 square foot tasting room, and a 9,500 square foot expansion to the production building. Proposed winery hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week, with the exception of events. The average anticipated number of visitors to the winery is 200 per week, again, not including events. The applicant has requested to hold a total of 121 winery events per calendar year. Those events would include 12 marketing events with a maximum of 300 attendees, 65 small-scale accessory winery events with a maximum of 80 attendees, 40 large-scale accessory winery events with a maximum of 300 attendees, and 4 wine release events also with a maximum of 300 attendees. Due to the number of events proposed, it is recommended that the winery be limited to 1 event of any type per day, and this is included in the recommended conditions of approval. The winery events are proposed to be held between the hours of 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Outdoor amplified sound is proposed for the marketing events, large-scale accessory winery events, and wine release events. Amplified sound is permitted until 10 p.m. with all of the events with the exception of the large-scale accessory winery events, where the amplified music must end by 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. The applicant submitted the required sound study, which concluded that outdoor amplified sound would comply with county noise level standards, provided that the speakers were placed as is detailed in the recommended conditions of approval. The proposed winery site is accessed via a 2,600-foot-long driveway located on a 20-foot wide access easement that extends from Davis Road east to the project location and is also utilized by 2 parcels on which the easement is located. Because the 20-foot wide easement doesn't allow for a wider driveway, the applicant has requested a modification from the required 25-foot width for a 2-way driveway to a 20-foot width. All on-site driveways will meet the width standards of the development title. The access driveway site has been reviewed by the fire department and can meet the standards for emergency vehicle access once it's improved. The driveway will be required to be improved to the full 20-foot width of the easement if the project and the modification is approved. To accomplish this will require removal of any improvements that extend into the easement, as well as an oak tree that is partially on the easement. Because projects approved with a discretionary application must mitigate for removal of native or heritage oak trees or historical trees, this mitigation is included in the recommended conditions of approval. A traffic study was required for the project and was performed in June 2021. The study concluded that the additional traffic generated from the proposed winery would not have a significant impact on traffic conditions on the surrounding public roadways. Therefore, no mitigation measures were required. CDD received 6 letters of opposition from adjacent neighbors, most of whom also utilized the private driveway for access. The letters expressed concerns related to increased traffic, access, crime, and the compatibility of the winery use with the surrounding agricultural uses. Regarding the traffic issue, as noted on the previous slide, a traffic study was performed and no mitigation measures were required, as the traffic analysis concluded that the project would have a less than significant impact on the public roadways. Addressing the access issue, the neighbors state that the easement should be used for residential traffic only. However, the easement appears to be unrestricted and therefore can be utilized for the proposed winery. The conditions of approval for this project require completion of a zoning compliance review application to recognize the private right-of-way, and this must be completed before any building permits are issued. Excuse me while I take a drink real quick. Also included in the recommended conditions of approval is the requirement to construct and maintain the driveway to the standards required by the California Fire Code and applicable San Joaquin County improvement standards. Specific details regarding the roadway will be reviewed and approved as part of the building permit. Regarding land use, wineries are considered to be a compatible use with AG 40 zoning, and any security issues related to crime should be referred to the sheriff's office, as we don't address that. CDD received an additional opposition letter earlier today that cited these same concerns and included concerns about signs and the removal of trees. The use of the easement, traffic, and related roadway improvements have already been discussed. In regards to signs and the removal of trees, the applicant is not proposing any signs, and recommended condition of approval 1O, as modified in the notes for this evening, addresses the requirements for tree removal. And this photo was taken from Davis Road, looking east, and this is the current driveway on the access easement. You can see the oak tree that is probably slated for removal in this picture. This picture was taken from the easement, also looking east, and right at the point where there are improvements that are in the easement that would have to be removed in order to improve it to the full 20-foot width. This picture was taken from the easement, looking north, and we're looking into a driveway that leads to a residence, and it's the residence that is closest to the easement. So that residence is approximately 150 feet from its property line. And so taking away the 20-foot wide easement, it would be approximately 130 feet from the access easement. This picture was taken at the end of the easement, looking west back down towards Davis Road. This picture is taken on the project site on the south side of the pond, and behind where I'm standing would be the production building, and then across the pond where you can see some golden shrubs or trees would be the multi-purpose building and the event center and the tasting room. There we go. The tasting room is over on this side of the pond. This photo is taken from the project site, standing on the south side of the pond and looking west down the driveway that is on the project site. So this led from the end of the access easement onto the property into the pond. And this will also have to be improved and to a 25-foot width for two-way traffic, which means that those trees would have to be removed also. It is recommended that the Planning Commission adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, adopt the findings for the use permit, and approve use permit number 2000012 with the recommended conditions of approval, including condition of approval 1O, tree preservation, as modified in the notes for this evening. Thank you. This concludes.
Thank you. Any questions for staff from the commission? Okay, seeing no, we will now hear from the applicant or the representative.
Good evening, Chair Grunsky and members of the commission. Brett Jolly, Land Use Counsel for the applicant, 3031 West Marsh Lane, Suite 230 in Stockton, with the firm of McKinley, Conger, Jolly, and Galarno. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, 157 California Reserve. I'm joined in the audience tonight by the principal of that company, Celia Hung. This winery is her baby. You'll hear from her in a moment. I'm also joined by our project architect, John Vieira of NJA Architecture in Lodi, to address any design questions that may arise this evening. I'd like to start by thanking your great staff. I know you hear that a lot, especially Deputy Director King, who sits on the dais with you right now, as well as Principal Planner Aguirre and Associate Planner Elisa Goulart, who just gave the presentation, and Deputy Fire Warden Steve Butler. Each of them has put some substantial time into this process, and I thank that to try to bring the best project forward to this commission. So in terms of our presentation, I'm going to call up Ms. Hung in just a moment, who will address you about her reasons for bringing the application forward and her history with wine. Once she's done, I'll return and address some of the issues that have been raised by the neighboring property owners, supplementing what Ms. Goulart just gave you in the staff report. And then at that point, if it works for you, Chair Grunsky, will take questions from the commission once we've both presented. Before I bring Ms. Hung up to speak, I'd just like to kind of set the table here for what we're discussing. This is a fairly straightforward winery. Wineries are conditionally permitted in the ag zone. This commission and the Board of Supervisors have recognized the importance of promoting the county, particularly the Lodi area, as a wine destination. This project seeks to further that policy. The county-wide ordinance has been enacted to provide standards for wineries to successfully sell wine and host events related to wine, while providing reasonable regulation to limit the impacts to nearby properties. It's a balance, but this commission, the Board of Supervisors, staff has worked over the decades to try to come up with appropriate regulations that balance those concerns. This project has stayed true to those regulations and even come below what is potentially allowed under those regulations. As part of the environmental review for the project, both a traffic study and a noise study were prepared and found no significant impacts would occur from either. And so with that in mind, we're going to ask you to approve this project tonight. But first, I'd like to call up Ms. Celia Hung to speak to you about her history in wine and why she is bringing this project forward.
Can you adjust the mic so we could hear you? It's kind of tall. Brett's taller.
I should have said this for you.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, councils and staffs. And my name is Celia Hung, and I'm the owner of 21200 North Davis Road, the winery and facility development. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about my vision and goal of this project. I have a passion for growing and appreciate the fertile grounds and abundant sunlight that in my location. Growing will continuously be my perpetual pursuit. I always wonder how my grapes will taste when it make into wine, and how good of the wine it can be. I got no answer from the large winery that I contracted my grapes to. All I learned is that they want cheap grapes. With that curiosity, I went through UC Davis certificate program. Through much learning, I became a certified winemaker. I'm so proud of it. With that, I have a much better understanding of the potential I have in producing a good wine. For owning our vineyard for 20 years and actively managing it for the last 7 years, I saw and I learned the joy and the pain of staying in this business as a small vineyard operator. I have no control of our crop if we don't make it into wine ourselves. And we have no contact with our customer if we don't have a name. Bottom line is the wine grape grower in the wine region. We have no face in this area. No one will really recognize who we are and how good we are. With that said, it is vitally important to have our direct contact with our customer, with our consumer, or a small vineyard and winery owner. That's the only way we can survive and continue to pursue our dream. And in order to do that, we have to have marketing and wine industrial related event on our site. And that will provide us the very important opportunity for us to continue to strive and continue our business in this place that we love. And my vision and my goal of how to connect with my customer is that I will approach it in 3 aspects. One is through exhibition, the contact of the arts and literature regarding the wine business and the winemaking, and the growing as well. And then I would love to host and create those exhibitions and display for people to come and see it at the same time to taste our wine. And the second is through education. I would love to host an organized event that will have seminar that's easy to understand and invite keynote speaker to introduce the process and even the area that we are in and what caused us to produce such a great quality of grapes. And then the third is to provide the safe environment for people that will come in, that who can enjoy it, safe and comfortable, and literally see the growing ground and see the production and the process, so that they can have a full experience with the great agricultural activity that we produce in this place. That's all I have to say, so please support me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commission. Again, Brett Jolly, counsel for the applicant. I believe that you have received a letter that we hand-delivered to the Commission this evening. That attempts to address the majority of the concerns that were raised by the neighboring property owners. Primarily, the opposition and objections have come from the Thompson and Pirovich families. Representatives of both are here tonight. I've met with them. There's no, despite the fact that you've got lawyers here, there's not necessarily animosity between the families, but there's a dispute over land use. So they're here. I understand that they have counsel who will be calling in tonight, who submitted a letter this afternoon, but I'd like to address those concerns that have been raised. It's important to note that with this project, there has been an attempt on Ms. Hung's part to try to address concerns from the neighboring landowners. We've had a meeting at the site, numerous calls and meetings. I was engaged in a meeting with staff from the county, the fire department, and Mr. Pirovich and Mr. Thompson in February, where we spent about 90 minutes looking at the access points, access issues, discussing those. And during that meeting, I encouraged them to tell us if there are things that they see with the project that could be changed to address their concerns. And as is sometimes common, the answer was really no. The only thing they see that works is no winery at that site. They just don't think it's appropriate at the site. So we're kind of at a deadlock on where to go on that. In order to try to address some of those concerns, the applicant actually did reduce the number of events from what was originally proposed. In the letter, I don't have a page number, but it's the only table in the letter, probably 2 or 3. I note what our initial proposal for marketing events was compared to with what we're asking tonight. In particular, we were asking for small accessory events, which are 80 people at 80 per year. We voluntarily reduced that to 65 per year. That's a 19% reduction. With large accessory events, which are 300 persons per event, we voluntarily reduced that from 60 to 40, a 33% reduction. We've also agreed to add a condition at staff's request, which is fine with us, that a maximum of 1 event may be held on any day. That caps the number of events on any single day, so you don't have multiple events in one day, which would obviously might create too much of a burden in a single day. The issue of access has come up. That's probably the main point of contention. One of the arguments that has been put forward by the neighboring landowners is that the scope of the easement on the property doesn't allow its use for a winery, or any commercial activity for that matter, back in the ag zone. But in fact, we have to look at the original easement language to determine that. I've actually attached the original easement, which dates back to 1930 as Exhibit A to the letter. There's also a map from 1983 showing that easement as Exhibit B. But that easement is a very general easement that says it is a right-of-way for roadway purposes 20 feet wide. And under the law of easements, unless there is a restriction on the easement when it is created, there's a presumption that it can be used for any reasonable use over time. And in fact, wineries are agricultural uses. They are uses in the ag zone. They're permitted in the ag zone. That's why we're here asking you for a permit rather than a variance or a rezoning. So it's a reasonable use within that zone. To the extent the neighbors are asking the commission to make a determination that this is beyond the scope of the easement, that's not the role of the commission. That's the role of the courts. It's a civil issue. It's a legal issue. This commission is not supposed to adjudicate people's rights and responsibilities under private easements. Remember, an easement is a private agreement between landowners that runs with the land. The county doesn't have any regulation over easements, so the county doesn't have any authority to regulate and make findings of fact on what uses are reasonable or not under an easement. It's also, I think, relevant to note that during our discussions, Mr. Thompson has repeatedly asked whether there are any other wineries that are served by a private easement that have been approved. His presumption is if there are not, then somehow that's a de facto reason or precedent that this commission could not approve a winery with easement access. First of all, that's not the rule. The rule is not if something hasn't happened that it can never happen in the future. But second, in fact, we did some research, and in 2004, an Omni winery was approved with a private easement for access. That's attached as Exhibit C to the letter, the site plan and the approval for that winery. Now, there may be more. We didn't dig incredibly deep, but there's one right there that shows that, in fact, this has been done before. Regarding the driveway width, the Thompsons and Puroviches have urged that you really need 25 feet for the driveway. 20 feet for the driveway is just too narrow, and it's going to cause safety and traffic issues. The traffic study and the fire have looked at this. They see no issue with the 20-foot driveway. No evidence suggests that the 20 feet is going to actually be too narrow. And in fact, when we look at county roads, public roads in the area, we can see that's the case. Davis Road, to which the driveway connects, is only 22 feet wide from fog line to fog line. So it's got 11-foot aisles as opposed to the 10-foot that would be on this driveway. Lucas Road to the south is actually only 18 feet paved width. It's a 55-mile-an-hour road, as is Davis, where people usually go about 65 or 70. So this is a private driveway that will be 20 feet wide, where people are going 15, 20 miles an hour. So public safety is not an issue. I understand that fire is here to confirm that. Although fire has not approved the driveway plan, it has not been submitted. They will do that as part of the building permit process. They've viewed the site. They've seen what we want to do. They don't have an issue with it. Finally is the issue of the heritage oak. And fortunately, Ms. Goulart showed you a picture of that beautiful heritage oak along the canal that sits within the easement. Our goal is to be able to leave that heritage oak and not remove it. I think everybody would like to see that tree stay. Now, what will happen is that will create what's called a pinch point, and it will reduce the driveway to about 17 feet right around that oak tree. So as part of the building permit process, fire will make its determination of whether or not that oak tree can stay. If it can, again, our preference, that's great, things stay as they are. If fire says, no, you've got to have a full 20 feet there and that oak tree is too much of an impediment, it's got to be removed. It will be removed. We have the legal right to do that because it is an impediment in the easement. And it will be removed consistent with the county's oak tree removal mitigation ordinances. Those are in place to require the removal process and a replanting of oak trees that are taken out. So not only are we telling you we'll comply with that, but it's actually a condition of approval, and so we will be held to that. So in conclusion, this winery is a reasonable application for its location. Ms. Hung has a passion for winemaking and wants to be able to do this on her property. She didn't mention it, but she's got, I believe, 70 or 80 acres of grapes already planted on the property that she has been selling at a loss and wants to be able to actually take that and make her own wine with it. And the project meets all of the county standards and has been reduced in response to neighbors' concerns, although the neighbors still remain dissatisfied with the project. We have done that. We think that this has gone for a long time. We continued this from December to try to work a deal with the neighbors. We think it's time to move forward, and we would urge the commission to approve the project as it is proposed and brought to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Any proponents of the project here or online that would like to speak? Seeing and hearing none, we will now hear from those who oppose this project. And please state your name and address when you speak.
Good evening. I'm appearing telephonically. Can you hear me?
Oh, you know, we have some, we're going to listen, sorry to explain it, we're going to listen to the people here in person first, and then we will take it to the internet phone calls.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jeff Thompson. I was raised on the properties that are being affected by this particular proposal. I drove my go-karts up and down the road that we're talking about. As children, we played along the canal and in the yard that will be altered by the proposed project. And so there's a substantial amount of emotion associated with the alterations and alterations in use that we are going to see if this project is approved as currently proposed. When my grandmother, Bessie, received the easement, working the easement with her brother, Elmer John Shin, I am very confident that they never envisioned that there would be a commercial establishment of the scope that is being proposed, and or that there would be many, many vehicles passing by the homestead, affecting the quality of life that exists in that place. 93 years ago is when this easement was established, or 92, excuse me. And it was established to serve as a private road, the family residences. And at that time, all of the residences that were served were of the same family, the Shin family, which established farming there in the late 1800s. We've been there a long time. We're wine grape growers too. We've been there a very long time in this business. We've seen the business evolve, and in that context, we support the efforts that are being made in this community, in this county, to promote wine. But there are right places and wrong places to do this. If we were simply talking about a wine processing facility, I don't think we'd have much of a problem with it. But where things fall apart is when you add the marketing component that requires substantial burdens on the neighbors, our family in particular, with traffic down that road. Now, Mr. Jolly has pointed out that the issue of easements is a legal issue, and I can't disagree with him there. I'm not an attorney, but we have an attorney as well who will make some comments later on. I simply want to emphasize that this really is changing what is, for 90 years plus, been a private lane to a public roadway over a half a mile long. And that is concerning to us, very concerning. As for mitigating the impact of this and meetings, there have been casual meetings where certain ideas have been discussed, but frankly, we have not had an opportunity to formally consider different alternatives. And we have not seen the developer come forward with concrete plans that we could perhaps react to. That's concerning to us. I think that the traffic study that was done is not adequate in that it never took a look or incorporated any traffic study specific to the private lane or road that will be used and how it will be impacted by this particular project. I ask that the Commission really take a hard look at this and see if this isn't a project, though worthy, in a wrong location at this point, and that although a winery may be desirable and acceptable, having marketing events with dramatic traffic increases on a daily basis, not just from the marketing events, but from the wine tasting room that is proposed, is a concern to us. If this were out on Davis Road, this particular project, I would have absolutely no objection to this project at all, because there would be good access and it would not require a burden on adjacent property owners. Thank you for giving me the time to share my concerns.
Thank you.
My name's Lance Pirovich. I'm related to the Thompsons, to the Shins. We all grew up on that ranch. And I want to express to you that this is farm country, not the Hollywood Bowl. We don't need to have 29,000 people a year come to concerts down our private road. And as far as the road is concerned, that will be between this winery person and the Woodbridge Irrigation District, because they're going to have to take out an abutment on Davis Road, and they'll also have to modify the canal to get their 20 feet of space to drive fire trucks down. There's no real need for another winery in Lodi. There's 85 wineries in Lodi. And you can go to just about any of them and have them custom crush your grapes. And they will make wine to your specifications. And there's plenty of room at the Lodi Grape Festival grounds for concerts and people that want to have a concert. Anyway, the lady that is trying to do all this on this farm property is also building a hotel across the street from the old General Mills plant on Turner Road, which would be a perfect place for her tasting room. It would be close to town, close to police, close to fire, close to hospitals, where we're not out there in the country. And there would also be a dining and rooms for people that wanted to go wine tasting. So I think this whole operation is totally unnecessary to do to our farming community. And if we wanted, I think the attitude of the county is to keep as much farmland as farmland rather than commercialize everything. It's just almost silly to do this in such an out of the way place. There's when you look at all the traffic that could come down Davis Road, there's sure going to be a problem someplace along the line. I'm worried somebody's going to have too many glasses of whatever they're drinking and drive into the canal, and that's a pretty dangerous. If you come out to the place and look at what we have out there and what the canal looks like, you'll see that just a little swerve could put you right into the ditch. And when that irrigation ditch is full, like it is right now, because they're trying to drain everything they can because of the melt, it's a pretty dangerous deal, especially if you've been drinking. So all I got to say, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Craig Thompson. My residence of record is the ranch here at 21030 North Davis Road. I intend to sleep there in the future. Currently, we have family living on the ranch and even time being some small children. As my brother pointed out, I too grew up on the ranch. I learned to ride my bicycle on that road. We have a lot of history there. But I think what's important here tonight, so you know where, I think it'll help if you know where I'm coming from. As a grape grower and a farmer, one of the things I'm very proud of participating in was the committee that formed the commission in Lodi, and the commission that promotes the wineries and has brought a vibrant wine industry to our community, and it's a wonderful thing. I'm very much in favor of it. But right things in the right places, under the right circumstances, I think is very important. I'm not an attorney, so I can only speak my impression of things. My first impression is, what is my impression or understanding of what Community Development Department, who I call Planning Commissioner and the Planning Commissioners, each of you. I look to your commission to help us grow our community in a most compatible and safe way. And that's more than just numbers, that's look and feel and the whole picture. So you're in a position here of looking at something that I think on surface value looks like a great contribution to the community. But I also, as a grower, and we're just one family, and Celia has a lot of resources behind her. We think the world of her as a person, but it's in these issues of these kinds of things, it's a bit asymmetrical. I believe she has more resources than we do. So we have to appeal to you to help stand behind us on these issues. So in my role as a grape grower and farmer in Lodi, I've been an ambassador to the industry. I've entertained a lot of people. And on that driveway, we run our equipment and we have our people going in and out. We use our pesticides and our sulfur and other things. And my biggest concern, and what makes this a huge, significant change of use, is the exposure to the general public. And to me, that means that up until now, every person that goes up and down that road is a friend, a family member, an employee, or a vendor to our farming operations in the area. And there is all a presumption of accountability to somebody in there. And I regularly, in my role of farmer, is security and safety along that road. And as a courtesy, I've invited extra width so people can pull over and that, but that's as a courtesy to my friends, family, employees, and vendors and neighbors. I am very uncomfortable extending that to people I don't know, and uncomfortable extending that to people who may have certain presumptions about us needing to serve them, which, we want to be good ambassadors, but there's a different dynamic that works there, and I don't know how to navigate that. And what are we dealing with? We're dealing with the sole mitigation, a road running by our vineyards, and I'm going to be dealing with 0.4 of a mile direct interface to this road. I am the farm manager, and my son and our family across the canal. That adds up to another 0.5 mile. Just in the near interface of having to now have all the same considerations of a public roadway, except we don't have the same rules and laws and controls of a public roadway. Also, this isn't just a road, it's a driveway that's going to get, and we're talking about, can't say anything other that, as the plan shows, this will be a substandard road that's essentially a 0.5 mile long to the winery, serving hundreds of people inside that road, with it being the only ribbon of ingress and egress. So it puts a huge burden on us to change what we were doing. So we're having to bring effort and value and everything else to this process, and we would be compelled to do so by your decision to say, yeah, we think that's okay, and we don't think we're creating an incompatibility in the neighborhood. So that is an issue. And as my brother pointed out, we don't have, Mr. Jolly did, in fact, offer, what would you need? Well, I don't have a vision of what a compatible mitigation would be, but neither do I believe, as in our position, it's our burden to be the creators of that vision. We rely on them. So let me go back a little to some of the premises of this whole issue. I've heard of a logical fallacy called the fallacy of sunk costs. That is, well, we've got so much into it here, maybe we can make some concessions to go along here. And I would invite you to look at this project as if not a thing has been done yet. And let's ask ourselves, this family has a wonderful vision of establishing a great facility back here, a half a mile detached from Davis Road. Well, is this a good choice? Are all the parts and pieces in place to make this a workable situation without overly burdening others and changing the look and feel? And I think that if there was nothing there at all, you might come to the same conclusions that my forefathers and cousins, who have since passed away, said. He said, in the 30s, I said, wouldn't it be great to put something back there, some kind of business? And my cousin Joaquin would say, well, yeah, but you'd have to work out the easement. He said, why is that? He said, well, he says, back when we did these easements, he said, it was a code. It was kind of law was a little more cryptic back then, and it kind of encoded things. He says, if you wanted you just to serve a farm and a house, you would write that easement down as 20 feet. Is if you want to do something commercial and plan on that, the code for that is you make that easement 25 feet or bigger. So there was an implied use and an understanding that we passed down through the years in our family, and even amongst each other, we honored this, that we knew that if we were going to do something, we'd have to work that out. So if you are taking this project from a position of scratch, say, is this a good project before you start, Mrs. Hunt, or is everything in place to do this? And I think it's a reasonable conclusion to come to that, I don't think you have the access worked out yet. There are some things that need to be done on that before you can decide that this is a feasible project. But instead, and I hate to say this, and this has been very troublesome, and I've been very, because I like the family so much. This is almost a coercion of, we're so far along, now you guys got to go along with us on the easement. And that's a very uncomfortable place for me to be in. And it's an uncomfortable place for our family to be in. And it's an uncomfortable place to be having to go to these measures that we feel we must at least defend our understanding of things. So I recognize Mr. Jolly is asserting that you are not a court to decide these, but on the other hand, you are the commission, and your decisions here do establish look, feel, community harmony, and a good future. And I would ask that you forestall an approval tonight and send this back saying, hey, why don't you get that easement thing figured out and have everybody with common vision before you move ahead on this? And maybe you can work it out, maybe you can't, but it's an important foundation to the entire project, and I really think it should have been done before we got here today. I think that's the only constructive thing I have to say at the moment, so I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the crowd that would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, anyone online or via phone, Teams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, and members of the commission, this is Timothy Kasuni, counsel for the Thompson family. Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Appreciate it. I'd like to echo the comments of Jeff and Craig Thompson. I wanted to add a few for myself. First of all, it would be a shame to have this come down to a legal battle in court over the propriety of expanding the use of the easement to 33,000 trips per year versus a handful of trips daily. That is the current situation and has been for almost 100 years. I would say that Mr. Jolly's representation to the commission that unless the restriction is expressed on the face of the easement, then they can do whatever they want with it is beyond erroneous. I pointed out just a brief synopsis as a bullet point in my letter today to the commission that simply is not the case. You cannot expand the use of an easement to that degree and to that quality. That's called a surcharge or a burden on the easement. These cases have been litigated for 150 years in California. I would also point out to the commission that staff has made a legal determination. Staff has stated on the staff report at page 7, quote, the documentation provided to the CDD verifying the easement does not place restrictions on the use of the access easement. Well, that's a legal conclusion, and it's just flat out wrong. You have to, among other things, assess the intent of the parties, the conditions that were created when the easement was granted 100 years ago. And I think I'm very confident the judge would not say, well, it was reasonably contemplated that 33,000 people a year would be traversing that road. It's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, staff and the county and the planning commission, there is a legal angle to this that has to be properly addressed and properly assessed. Secondly, the traffic study, and this is a huge issue, the traffic study didn't even take into account the 33,000 trips on the private easement road. They just dealt with impacts on nearby public roads. Well, that's hardly a traffic study. Both factually and legally, the mitigated negative declaration and the traffic study is flawed on its face, and I would encourage the Planning Commission to ask staff to go back to the drawing board on that because it's just defective on its face. I would also point out a couple other things. Mr. Jolly referenced a, quote, balancing of concerns. Well, as Craig and Jeff has indicated, there really hasn't been balancing of concerns. It's a situation where the winery property owner for the project is not getting what they want, and they just want to ram this through the commission, ram it through. Eventually, if the commission were to grant this project, it would proceed to the Board of Supervisors, and then it's going to end up being litigated. And I would encourage the commission to avoid a situation where property owners are fighting with each other in court over this project. There needs to be a true meet and confer on this. As my clients have said, there is zero animosity to the project owner personally, but they do feel like they're getting a little bit bullied, and I can understand that. A couple other comments. With respect to the oak tree, that oak tree has been there for 100 years. Mr. Jolly characterized it as an obstruction of the easement. Well, he's going to have a problem telling a court that there's been an obstruction to the easement for 100 years. I would suspect that's maybe about how old that tree is. And it's only now coming to the fore because they want to have 33,000 vehicular trips a year as opposed to a handful a day. So in sum, I want to invite the commission to review my letter that I sent earlier today. There's a lot more detail on all of these points. I do consider that letter as part of the record. I've not been told otherwise, and it sounds like the commission members have received it. I also forwarded a copy to Mr. Jolly earlier today as a courtesy to him so he could have that. In closing, I would encourage the commission members to really give this more consideration and not render a vote approving the project at all. If it is going to consider approving it, it has to be continued to allow for meaningful meet and confer. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But to approve the project with this kind of a cloud over the legality of the use of this access easement, I think would be a mistake and a disservice to both the Thompson family and the project owner, as well as the community at large. And I thank and appreciate the commission members for giving me an opportunity to voice my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online that would like to speak against the project?
Scott Pirovich, are you able to hear me all right?
We got you.
Okay. I am Scott Pirovich, son of Lance Pirovich, property owner there adjacent to the proposed property. I've got a little letter that I've written up just to make things a little bit more concise. With the current proposal of 12 marketing, 40 large-scale accessory wine events, 4 wine release events, that totals to 56 events per year where 300 people may attend. That is actually, one of these events every 6.5 days. In addition to this, there are also 65 small-scale events proposed. That's a lot of activity for someone who has yet to even have an operating winery on site. As defined by a April 1st, 2014 document from San Joaquin County, wine release events are actually already included under accessory winery events. So having an additional 4 events for wine releases should not be necessary, and when they're already requesting 40 large events. And to me, having 4 large accessory winery events, 40 per year, also seems like a lot. That would be 3 events per month for 300 attendees. That's a lot of wine club activities and barrel tastings, if you ask me. I would rather see that down to 1 event per month with 1 to 2 small events per month as well, instead of the 5 small events per month that's currently proposed. As far as the 12 marketing events go, I feel like this is a move for there to be 12 weddings or concerts hosted per year. And I feel like the intention is not to have a winery, but instead have an event center where the goal is to host parties and then sell wine on the side. If you look at the current area around, there are 4 current locations that host larger events, all within a relatively small radius to where this winery would be. There is Viaggio, which is 0.8 miles away, Jesse's Grove, 1.9 miles, Wine and Roses, 2.2, Oak Farm, 2.3 miles. There are actually only 3 residential lots with a little bit of agriculture on them that separate the current proposed winery project and Viaggio. The Hovatter, Schrader, and Dolce, I may have mispronounced their name, families. I do not want to set a precedent that these types of places can be set up and saturate the area. If Lodi needs these places, please spread them out. For instance, Mettler is on the other side of town, Harney Lane's on the other side of town, And all of these places, all 6 of these places, have their own private access from the street. And that's what I'm going to go into right now. Most of the wineries in the area that I can think of do not have a shared road with its neighbors, which there are 4 residences that are all along this road that would have to share it with the winery. I'm not concerned about the structure of the road because a little bit more asphalt is easy to pay for when you're hosting a winery or when you're hosting a wedding. It's the size of the road and the structure, how it would be structured. Personally, I have 2 young children and wouldn't feel comfortable with letting them play with upwards of 150 cars driving down a road at any time. That's directly adjacent to the yard and old family home that's been in the family for generations. The road currently at its narrowest, as you can see in that picture, is only about 12, 14 feet wide between the hedge and the Woodbridge irrigation canal that runs parallel. Would the winery then propose installing what would be an unsightly guardrail as well to prevent cars from driving into that irrigation ditch, whether they are distracted, intoxicated, or it could be nighttime and the driver's unaware of the hazard. I understand that you can set speed limit signs up and notices along the road. You can try your hardest to prevent people from driving intoxicated, but accidents happen. These are major liabilities for us to think about. Then, as we are landowners, are we going to have to carry some extra insurance to cover anybody else's accidents? If somebody drives into the yard, into the vineyard itself, into a tractor that somebody might be operating. You know, you could have somebody out disking a vineyard row and in a tractor and have a car veer off the road right into that tractor. And I mean, that would just be a horrible accident. Overall, from a business side of things, I understand that 157 California Reserve is trying to use the natural resource and land that they own to make the most money, but at what expense? I do not feel like it's the honest intent to make wine at this facility, but the intent is for an event center to be placed here. Their primary owner, Celia Hung, does not even live in the area full time, and her way of life is not going to be what's affected by these proposed changes, while my extended family, who has property all around, that's been in the family as far back as the 1850s, will be the ones suffering. I also, Ms. Hung expressed that she had been operating at a loss recently and would rather take the wine selling into her own hands, but what about the years before that? Were you operating at a loss then? Because the last couple of years have been very difficult on the grape industry. You know, it's not every year you're going to make money. You know, if it was that much of a guarantee, a lot more people would be doing it. And the winery or and from what I've understood, having a winery, you lose a lot of money to begin with. Also, I made a couple notes. If they only estimate 200 people per week attending the winery, how can you really justify all of these large events? You know, are you really going to pack it out that well? But I mean, you could, you never know. And I may have misheard the lawyer talking earlier when he was talking about a winery that had used an easement. I believe he said Omni Winery. Where is that located? Is that in San Joaquin County? I did a quick Google search. I am online, so I might not have heard the name clearly. But if he's talking about Omni Winery, there's not an Omni Winery that's popping up on my Google search in San Joaquin County or Lodi. Just overall, I don't think this winery has the intent of selling wine. They want to host events, host weddings. Viaggio's right there. You got Oak Farm, Wine and Roses. You know, it's just the intent to have a winery isn't there. It's all about the events. Thank you, Commission. I hope that you guys turn down this proposal and have a good evening.
Thank you. Anyone else online?
There potentially might be one more. Last person, if you'd like to speak, you may speak now.
No, we had our opportunity to speak. If anyone online wants to speak,
Like they're not unmuting.
we will hear the rebuttal at this time.
Thank you, Chair Grunsky, members of the Commission. Again, Brett Jolly on behalf of the applicant. We heard compelling testimony from several speakers who own property in the area tonight, and as they noted, there is a genuine affection between the families. There's happens to be a dispute on this particular issue. I do think it's important to point out that while there is admitted emotion and nostalgia attached to how the grandparents had that house and what was done on that property decades ago, the fact is that none of the speakers actually lives in that house anymore. Mr. Thompson did say he intends at some point to potentially move back into that house, but he doesn't reside there right now. There are two other residences at the end of the road. They have not come out in opposition to the project. So it's the property that has the house that is not occupied by any of these speakers. More importantly, that property is actually operated by the Thompson and Pirovich family. They run a commercial farming operation out of there that has a lot of farming equipment and traffic that comes through it, which is reasonable. It's in the ag zone, but it uses that easement for that very commercial purpose. So the idea that a winery is a commercial retail endeavor that's not appropriate there, but a commercial farming operation is, doesn't really add up. These are both types of uses envisioned for the ag zone. Regarding the fact that whether the roadway and the easement would ultimately allow this, I respectfully disagree with Attorney Kasani's argument to you that you are somehow making legal determinations about the scope and reasonableness of the easement. That's a misrepresentation of what the law holds. The courts balance factors in determining whether or not use of an easement is reasonable. It is a trial that takes place in front of a judge. An evidentiary hearing, witnesses are called. It is not the role of the Planning Commission to try to adjudicate that as the neighbors would like or would like you to believe you should do to delay the project. The fact is the Commission looks, there's an easement, it provides legal access, there's no sign of restriction on that easement document. You put the conditions of approval on the project and how that easement has to be improved. If there is a dispute between the parties as to whether or not that easement can ultimately be improved to those standards, it's on the applicant to work with the other parties to the easement and to, if necessary, for the parties to go to the courts to adjudicate that. But it's not the role of the Planning Commission to either delay the project for litigation to address these issues or, as was suggested by one of the speakers, for the Commission to just kick this back so the parties can spend potentially additional years arguing over this issue. We have presented a reasonable project. There's no reason to delay the hearing tonight. This project was first filed in 2000, January of 2000, I believe. So it's been over 3 years. Obviously, COVID derailed it reasonably for a year of that, but we last continued this in December to try to work with the neighbors to do exactly what their attorney is now saying should be done. We invited them in writing to try to contact us to negotiate discussions about this. It didn't happen. We did meet at the property site once. Again, there was not any material desire to work on this from the neighbors. And I don't know to what extent the attorney was engaged. He didn't say when he was engaged, whether it was today or whether it was 6 months ago. His letter parrots much of what was in the form emails that were submitted in December. I don't know whether that's because he wrote that at the time for them or because he got involved now and just used their material because he didn't have time. But either way, we continued this hearing 5 months ago to try to do exactly what he's saying we should try to do now, and there was no willingness to do that from the neighbors. So to now ask for that at the hearing and say we need to continue it so we can discuss is disingenuous. That said, Ms. Hung does reside at the property, but she lives here and in Oregon. She spends her time between both, and she will continue to reside at the property. And she likes the families and will continue to work with them, whether there are appeals or litigation or not. As a neighbor, she will continue to work with them to try to put forward the best improvements to the roadway, to provide the least impact to those neighboring properties. And so we ask you to grant your approval tonight. If it goes to the Board of Supervisors on appeal, we will continue to work together to try to resolve this. If no appeal is taken to the Board of Supervisors, we'll still work with them to try to resolve this because it's the neighborly thing to do, and she wants to put forth a project that is beneficial to the community, notwithstanding the neighbors' concerns. So we would ask that you approve tonight, and with that, I will wrap up.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? We're going to bring it back to the commission now and discuss everything that we've heard. No, it's the process. Opposition had it. The rebuttal is the final from the applicant. We don't get to go rebuttal again. But we're going to bring it back to the commission and discuss. Am I right on that, counsel?
You are correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We can't. We're bringing it back to the commission, so just let us discuss. Okay, back to the commission. Comments? I mean, you get reasonable folks on both sides, it seems, and can't quite work it out. As far as too many wineries, the free market will decide that, not us. You know, I mean, if there's too many wineries, people won't go, and the place will fail, and that's her problem, not ours. As far as farmland, it is zoned for it. There is a precedent. I think the ag, as we discussed last time we were up here, the ag is very broad. I think as a commission at some point we should address that. And a question for Public Works, is there a requirement? What was the requirement for wineries or for staff of a road for a winery? Is there anything there, or is it just?
We have Chris Halen here with Public Works if you want to speak with him.
Yeah, just curious. I don't know the answer, so therefore I was curious. So can any winery go, what size of a road do you have to have a winery on it in our ordinance? Is there anything?
So the access road is not necessarily a public works requirement. So that's the access road itself across the easement. That's the 20-foot wide.
Yeah.
The driveway, so basically the connection to Davis Road, that's what we would be concerned with. The minimum commercial driveway width is actually 20 feet in the county.
But if someone wanted to do something on the frontage there, that would be your guys', right? Because that'd be on Davis. Just in general.
Yeah, and I believe they are proposing to improve, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, improve the connection. So the actual driveway for where the easement connects to Davis Road, they are proposing to improve that to the county standard driveway.
But if I lived on any road, any like Davis Road or anything, I guess the question is there a requirement for road in our ordinance for how big a county road has to be in order for us to put a winery on it? I know it doesn't.
Are you talking about in this instance, it would be like the width of Davis Road?
Yes.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The county road is a public roadway, as I think Brett Jolly pointed out. There are county roads, they do vary. You do see some 24-foot wide pavement widths. I think he pointed out there was a couple 22-foot wide. So anywhere between 20 to 24 is pretty much what you see on these kind of local county roads.
Got it. And I think he said one was Lucas Road was 18, I believe. Okay, that answers what I was.
Okay.
Thank you. Love to hear from some other people up here on the commission.
Yeah, I would like to say I haven't driven that particular area, but at some other places here in San Joaquin County, I do understand what the gentlemen are trying to say, that what it looked like. A lot of things have changed, not necessarily they have to change, but the thing that I like is, even though you may not like what they're doing absolutely everything that should be done. The numbers were decreased. So there's two sides of the story. It's really nice to hear both sides, but it's also very concerning to see that what is it more that they can do that will make you feel that you are doing okay, that emotionally, and you're feeling that that's what you were looking 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. That's how it feels like. Everything is not going to look exactly the same. But that being said, again, our job here is about land use. We cannot tell people exactly if there is too many wineries, like the chair was saying. It's not our job to tell people, hey, there's too many wineries, there shouldn't be another one. We don't dictate that. Our commission doesn't dictate that. That's not our job description. I'm really nice to see that you guys get along with each other, but don't get along on this particular matter. So sitting here on the commission, it doesn't. I don't know how can we say that we are not here to preach. We are not here to tell people what to do. We are just here to look at the land use, and the land use, the agricultural land does permit this. This thing has come before us, even before, I believe, when the area is so wide and the uses are so wide that not knowing the depth of it, I did go through everything. Fortunately or unfortunately, the iPad wasn't working, so we had to read the hard copy through or on the website, and I read it twice, and it makes sense to a certain extent that what you feel, you have the right to feel that because you've been in the area, but also you don't live there. If she's living there and she's willing to work, especially on that easement of 20 feet, which is required, and that's what we're looking at. I'm trying to balance it out in a way that it makes sense to both sides. I would go with the thing that because of our job description, what we sit here for, I would support the project, thinking that you would still keep continuing working with your neighbors as a neighbor. Always good to be a good neighbor and do the very best you can. And then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the commission that would like to speak?
Yes. Thank you for coming tonight, and we do appreciate you taking part and that you are concerned about your property. But it does, just like she said, we're not here to the emotional part, just whether or not it's a land use and whether or not it's allowable. And it appears that they have gone through all the things legally, that it would qualify. But also I do feel your pain with being in the family for so long and to see things change. I would support the project.
I would handle it the same way that you guys are. I don't know the legality of it. I think Mr. Jolly was saying, that is for the courts to decide, and it's just not what we do up here. And, we are pretty much land use, what's there for. I do feel that the Ag 40 is very, very broad. It's too broad. I would, like to work on that. But for where it stands right now, there's a precedent. It is allowed. And, it is a free market. If whether she succeeds or fails is her risk.
I echo what's already been said. This is one of the hardest parts of our job is because I've actually, full disclosure, when I was a graduate, I drove the gondola for the grape harvester for the Thompson family. So I know, and their cousin John Binnick and I are way back when. And so I feel what you're saying about your land. But I wish there was something we could do other than what our job is. And our job is to look at land use and how it's going to be used. I don't believe all the events that you are proposing are going to happen. I think we're going to see this is a two-phased, 5-year project, and so much will happen between now and then that I think you'll probably be revising your plans. But again, I'm not your financial advisor at this point. So I'm in support of this application.
I know the Thompsons, family friends of from way back, but I understand. I wouldn't want anybody, 16,000, 20,000 cars running up and down my driveway. I wouldn't want that either. And for the last 90 years, that's been your driveway, and I feel for you. I don't know what else to do for you, but I just saying I know where you're coming from. Sorry, that's it.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the project as documented.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have a roll call?
Commissioner Milas?
Yeah.
Sorry. Can we also add the amended condition of approval that was included in the notes for this evening? Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, motion and a second. We have those. Roll call?
Commissioner Milas?
Yes.
Commissioner Rustaller?
Yes.
Commissioner Senga?
Yes.
Commissioner Midgley? Commissioner Grunsky?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, moving on. I think at this time, do we bring our director in? Oh, she already heard me. Okay, other business?
Thank you. I have to recompose here because I just ran down a hallway. Okay. So a couple of updates at the Board of Supervisors. We did go forward with a few items this week. We had 3 items at the board, and all 3 were accepted. So the development title was updated. We had a zone reclassification truck parking facility that was approved as well. And the third one was the cell tower, which you probably are interested in how that ended up. So if you recall, the appeal was done by the cell tower company, and the appeal was granted, therefore the cell tower was approved. So I like to give you guys kind of what the final determination is, so you know that how the board stands on those things. One thing I'd like to do for the next meeting, if it's okay with you guys, we've talked a lot about code enforcement lately and how things are changing. I think it would be beneficial to the commission for us to do a presentation, and I promise it will not be like an hour-long presentation, but just to keep you updated on some of the changes that we're making in case you hear about it from the public. We're doing it very slowly, thoughtfully, and gradually because it is a change in how code enforcement's been handled historically for San Joaquin County. So I always mention this, Code Enforcement Chief Tim Burns, he comes to the Planning Commission, he's very engaged in the land use issues that come up for code enforcement, and so he and I will work together to give you a presentation at the next meeting. And if it's okay with you, I'll turn over the future meeting schedule to Deputy Director King.
Okay, so our next scheduled meeting is May 18th, and it's revisions of approved actions for a site approval for Stoneham Winery. They're adding some marketing events, or some events in general. There's a general plan, zone reclassification, and zoning compliance review. This is a project that you heard in December. It's on the corner of 8 Mile and Mickey Grove Road for truck parking. brought it back. We added the underlying project, and you guys will hear it again, May 18th. We have no items scheduled for June 1st, and tentatively scheduled for June 15th is a use permit for a religious assembly on Bethany Road in Tracy. That's it.
Okay, planning commissioners' comments. I have some. I feel like I think I got 18 months or something like that on here. I feel like Ag 40. I mean, most of these issues have just been winery versus neighbor. I mean, I think there was a short-term rental. The ag zone is so broad. It feels like we're just not protecting. Like I wasn't even crazy about that last project at all, right? Is there a way to say, hey, no, you can't have easements, a winery behind the easement, or if you're going to have a winery, the public road has to be X. I think there's got to be some sort of clarity for people when they go and spend money. You say, hey, you go buy a property and all of a sudden you got the easement and there's a winery. It's a different situation. I'm just saying, I feel like it's very unclear and it's just too easy to do stuff. And I'm landowner, ag guy, right? Ag trucking, farmer, you name it. But it's very unsettling. You think about the people that go out to these places, and I mean, how many times have you heard it, right? They go out there, they spend all the money. It's, everything out there is at $800 to a couple $1 million, and all of a sudden there's something next door, and of course it's allowed because it's the ag zone, right? It seems like everything's allowed. I know that's not the case, but it is very broad. I don't know if we can work with Public Works or look at the wine ordinance. It seems to be we can do some sort of better structure so that people, when they go buy a property, they know what they're getting into. Maybe we could work with the wine commission out there in a certain wine. I want to say, Director Jolly, we talked about wine zones before or something, or a long time ago. Maybe it was just a conversation, but some sort of idea where we can create some clarity where it's not just, you're just not worried about buying your neighbor's place to prevent a winery going there. Again, not this, maybe it's the size of a road that limits. Someone could say, okay, this is Lucas Road, it's 18 feet, therefore we can't put a winery on that because of traffic or something that thing. But I would love to see something come up to us before, while I'm still here, just to, I feel like we're always, I don't have a leg to stand on to really reject the project, but at the same time, I'm not particularly like the project, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, it's not our decision on if it's a good project. If it fills all the land use issues, that's our decision making. Did I think it was a great project? No. If you know anything about the wine industry, there's going to be too many events. It's not going to work.
But that's what I'm saying. Can we look at the land use? It is, I'm trying to go by the book of land use. Can we look at that land use or even the wine ordinance or something to that? The scope seems very large. I mean, I think we've had this from Viaggio to, how many wineries have we had? And some are fine. Some are fine. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of neighborhood opposition, but there needs to be some clarity for the public as well. I don't know. Any ideas? This is, by the way, I'm just off the cuff spitballing planning commissioner's comments. So
I can touch on some of it. So when you have a land use permit, there are certain findings that have to be made, and they're part of the staff report, and you read what staff puts forward, and we would have to be making the findings in the affirmative to recommend approval. That doesn't mean you have to agree with our findings. So you do always have the opportunity to look at those findings and say, I disagree. I don't believe this is compatible. I can't make finding 3, so therefore I can't support it. So that's why we're before you. I don't want you to ever feel like you are required to approve it. Staff makes a recommendation based on our analysis. The concern with restricting properties from development if they have an easement gets a little tricky. This county, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of easements throughout our county. And when you create a blanket policy that says you cannot do certain types of uses if you have easement, you're taking away the right for someone to even apply for that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Kim wants to weigh in on this at all, but we have not wanted to go in that direction because inevitably you'll find another location where the easement is not a problem. but you've now restricted it if you put it in the code that says you may not have a winery if you are located on an easement. So really, each project does need to be looked at for the merits of that project. And it's kind of the same thing with the short-term rentals. You know, we kind of have to look at, the idea with short-term rentals is that we have an ordinance that restricts them from having events. We restrict the number of people that can stay in them. They're supposed to be used as homes. So there shouldn't be 100 cars going to a short-term rental because you can't have 100 people living in or staying in one home. So that's the tricky part, is that when you create an ordinance that prohibits something across the board, you are going to inevitably find a site that actually works just fine, but now we've got an ordinance that says you can't even apply. So that's my 2 cents on it. So, but do please remember that you do have the ability to review the findings. You have the ability to add other conditions if you find that something would be to help the situation that maybe, staff does always try to work with an applicant, and we always consider the opposition's comments to try to see if we can resolve it with some of the conditions that we might be able to put on a project that would help address it. This is a difficult one in that the only access to this individual's property is a 20-foot wide easement. That's it. If there was an alternative for her, we would probably have recommended she consider that. But that was the only site. So unfortunately, it's probably going to be a civil matter between the two.
Yeah, which is what it should be, I think. But it is. I think that my gut on that was they all seem very reasonable to each other, and so they're going to work something out. I mean, they're hugging after the decision, so I assume they're going to be able to figure something out. So I know we're not supposed to. Of course we have disagreed with staff before. I didn't think there was enough to go against it, but I don't know. I just think of it how broad I don't want to be restrictive either. It's a fine line, so I guess it's just an emotional decision, or a conversation. But I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Is the property a resident now?
Pardon?
Is the property a resident now, the winery or proposed winery? Is it a resident?
There is a residence on the property, I believe, and she does stay in that. That's, right. I believe that's what.
That's what they said, but I just, so she's just going to make this another Viaggio or where, an entertainment center.
Well, I don't like to use people's names of the businesses. I will say that Viaggio does get used quite often as an example. They were an operation that was, they were operating long before we revised the winery ordinance. So they are not, that situation cannot occur in another winery.
Well, and by the same side, it could be one of those smaller point wineries that not a lot of people go out to at the same time.
Right.
You just don't know. I think the market will decide.
Well, and it goes back to code enforcement also. You look at only 300 people. Mm-hmm. Okay, who's going to count that?
So that's one of the things.
That's 500 are showing up to a wedding. Right.
Well, that's one of the things that we're working with on with our code enforcement division. So we have the ability to send staff out on weekends, and we have. When we get a complaint, we also have the ability to accept documentation for when a neighbor says that they had an event that was maybe not. If you recall, we have a marketing calendar where all wineries with events are supposed to put their scheduled event, identify the type of event, the number of people, whether they're having music, and they're not allowed to add more events to the marketing calendar than they're approved for. So it's pretty easy for us to prove if somebody didn't get something on the calendar and they had the event, and Google is our friend. Not hard to find the advertised events out there. So we do have the opportunity to hold facilities accountable if they go outside of their permit. Without utilizing all the tools that we have for code enforcement, it has been challenging. We've kind of had the history of being complaint-based only, and we were not utilizing fines, and we weren't even feeing people for the cost of code enforcement doing their work. So there really hasn't been a great incentive for people to comply, but that's what's changing, and that's what I want to make sure that you guys know about, because when we can lay it out for you and get it all up and running, which is a little bit of a slow process, it will give you, I think, a better peace of mind to know that if something doesn't operate like they have proposed and it's approved, that we can do something about it.
Yeah. Okay, that's unless anyone else, we got everything. We knocked it out. All right, we're gonna adjourn.